So here's the plan. I've got a spare controller board for a 3D printer, so I need to build a 3D printer to go with it. I went online and I found an open source Delta called the Neutron, and now I am building it, but I am cutting as many corners as possible as an experiment to see how much I can get away with. Obviously that does require a bit of a disclaimer, because when this inevitably fails, you cannot take this as a criticism of the design. If it doesn't work, it's because I've ignored the design and ignored best practices and used quite poor quality materials. Anyway, let's see how it goes. So this is part of the base. You print 3 of everything because it's rotationally symmetrical. Here you can see all the holes that the hardware will go into. The layer lines are pretty poor, it hasn't printed very well, but it is structurally strong. So I think it will work. Just a problem here at the top, one of the holes that the screws meant to go was it printed filled in. So I don't know if that was a G-code problem or the printer not coping. Here is the rods. I'm going to talk about this a bit later. I printed with a raft, which turned out to have been a mistake, but these are probably the best quality print I got out of anything. They're really, really sturdy, these. I printed them with high infill, I think 50% or so. But they were completely stuck and it was quite hard to get them off.
5 minutes later.
It was really hard to get them off.
"15 minutes later.
Yeah, don't try this at home, kids.
He's got a knife.
That's not a knife.
There we go, got it off, and it did tear up the blue tape that was on my print bed as well, annoyingly. Right, so the top pieces, they went badly. So they don't fit in my print volume. So the first thing I tried to do was put them in an angle. You can see on this time-lapse that actually the one on the right had completely warped early on. And then you're about to see that it will come off the print bed and then go to spaghetti. So then I tried again. I lowered it below the print bed so that it would print upright, and it just lost a bit from the end. So I gave that a go. The infill was really odd. I think the settings were wrong for infill, and it was all on one side, which was a bit weird. It was also the layer heights were weird, and it kept knocking, which is what started to cause the problem on the last one. I stopped this one early because the print head was knocking against the part. So this print was nearly successful. Oh, and then it wasn't. No, that one had poor adhesion. And this is the next day. I think this is the one that was almost successful. Yeah, so this one almost completed. And then it failed. Great. Okay, so one of the major problems with printing with such a large nozzle, it was a 0.8mm nozzle, is that I had to file basically every single hole because it was all too small. The tolerances hadn't worked because the extrusion width was so wide. So this is part of the carriage which holds the magnets which help lift the effector. I had to get the linear bearings in, which was hard. I don't have footage of it, but I did use a hammer on one of them, and that did break the carriage, so I had to super glue it. It took ages to get these bits of hardware in as well, and a lot of effort. Yeah, here's where I'm fixing the one that I broke with a hammer. Here it is, one finished carriage. Perfect. Well, not perfect. Okay, let's talk about the top. You saw earlier on that every print I've shown you so far failed, and I'm here to tell you that I did not do any more prints after that. I basically hacked together the least bad of the failed prints to make a top. So one of the problems was, I think the belt tension might have been off, because the actual shapes were a bit off, and it was sort of like anything that was meant to be curved was a bit skewed to one side. So I think there was some physical problems with the printer as well as the settings, which I've since tried to alleviate. But all of the holes were totally the wrong size, so I've had to file away. The print quality is visibly not worked at all, it's terrible. Okay, so the top pieces had failed in a way that they had just started to have the change of angle so that they'll fit together, but not really enough to get any purchase. So what I did was I went into Tinkercad and just quickly made a prism the right size to go in the middle. I just quickly printed it with a raft to give something to attach all three pieces to. So I just did it with loads and loads of hot glue, like every single possible gap was pumped full of hot glue. And then on the other side, I put a failed effector. And here we have it, the finished article. Well, the half-finished article. So this is the effector. I haven't shown you me making this. It's actually made out of hips, which you shouldn't be able to print without an enclosure, but I tried it as an experiment and it actually worked quite well. Now, the linear rods are made of wood. They're meant to be steel. I chose to use a wooden dowel. That's one of the main reasons why this won't work. The base plate was being sold as a mouse mat. It's aluminium with some kind of coating. I'm hopeful that the hot end won't melt the coating, but I will be putting blue tape on it anyway, because I don't know what it is. It's got a slightly textured surface, so it might be that it could hold a print without any covering, but I'm not going to risk that, because if by some miracle this can print, I don't want to melt the first print I do straight onto the print bed. Okay, so here are some things I learnt the hard way. First of all, don't use a huge nozzle for this. I used a 0.8mm nozzle, which is quite big for a 3D printer. And that caused a couple of problems. With the PET, which is the green plastic I used, it printed really well, but I stupidly used a raft for these arms that hold the effector. Because they're so tall, I wanted them to be particularly well adhered to the bed, but that was a big mistake because actually it was impossible to get them off. I actually snapped a knife trying to remove them, and in the end I had to use the rotary tool to sort of file away at them till they were free. So that was a mistake. The other thing is all the tolerances were completely off because it's such a chunky extrusion. So I had to file everything, and that meant in the end, even though the prints had been really quick, I hadn't actually saved any time. And the other thing is settings go a bit weird when you do a big nozzle, and that means, well, what it meant for me was I didn't get the settings right for ABS, and I had, as you've seen, a lot of failed prints, which is a waste of time and a waste of plastic. Don't use Phillips head hardware, use hex, use Allen key hardware. I almost ruined one of the carriages by getting a screw permanently stuck when it's stripped. I'm still terrible at filming. I tried to be clever by using camera glasses to film everything I was doing so that you'd see what I see. But they weren't actually on right, so most of the footage was unusable. So thanks for watching. The next part of the project is to make the electronics, obviously. For that, I am going to be harvesting the power supply out of an old PC, and then as a side project, building a new, better PC inside the case. If you want to see whether this works out, stay with me. Let's be honest, it's not going to. But I will be posting the next step of the project as soon as I can. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.